Post-Impressionism 1. Post-Impressionist painters took the artistic style of their predecessors in new directions. Not content with creating spontaneous paintings of light and shadow, French artists Georges Seurat and Paul Cezanne took a more analytical approach. They used color in bold ways and made their paintings look more solid than their Impressionist predecessors. Here's a Sunday afternoon on the Isle of Girot by Georges Seurat, oil on canvas, painted 1884 to 1886. Here's Mont Sainte-Victoire by Paul Cezanne, oil on canvas, painted 1902 to 1904. Post-Impressionistic art, the Post-Impressionist movement. In the last 2 decades of the 19th century, a group of young painters grounded in the Impressionist school set off in new and at times diverse directions. Those artists came to be grouped under the label Post-Impressionists. This new generation retained some of the techniques of French Impressionist masters Monet and Renoir, such as their vibrant color palette, distinctive brushwork, and subject matter taken from real life, but Georges Seurat, Paul Cezanne, and other post-impressionists rejected the impressionist principle of recording a scene objectively. They preferred a more personal and emotional approach. In so doing, they, in effect, spurned both realism and naturalism as well. By painting what they felt rather than strictly what they saw, post-impressionists laid the groundwork for even more abstract artistic trends in the coming century. Abstract art, having an identifiable object, but without details and with visual elements rearranged or simplified. We have A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte by Georges Seurat, post-impressionist. We have Mont Sainte-Victoire by Paul Cezanne. We have The Gleaners by Jean-François Millet, a realist. And Water Lily Pond, Harmony in Pink by Claude Monet, an impressionist. Post-impressionistic art. Georges Seurat. Born into a wealthy Parisian family in 1859, Georges Seurat spent 2 years at the esteemed Paris art school, École des Beaux-Arts. He left school to serve a year of military service, but upon his discharge, he did not resume art training, choosing instead to work independently on small drawings and paintings. Seurat took a scientific approach to painting. He studied color theory and meticulously planned his works, making numerous preliminary sketches. Though he died at the age of 32 and left behind a relatively meager body of work, his brief career yielded some masterpieces of lasting value. Here we see A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte by Georges Seurat. Pointillism. Seurat wanted to do more than merely record the colors that he observed in nature, as Claude Monet had done. He used dabs of color in a disciplined, orderly fashion to create the illusion of solid forms on canvas. To learn how the eye perceives color, Seurat immersed himself in the scientific study of optics and color theory. He learned that if he placed tiny dots of pure color next to each other on the canvas, the eye would mix the colors together when the painting was viewed from a distance. Blue and yellow dots next to each other, for example, visually merged to form green. The effect was a dazzling, pulsating image that Seurat preferred to dull, muddied colored mix on a palette. The technique became known as Pointillism. Pointillism, a stippling technique in which an artist uses closely placed dots of various colors. From a distance, your eyes mix the color dots in the artwork to see the illusion of a new color and the illusion of solid forms. Or the term Seurat preferred, divisionalism. His painting process was meticulous and painstakingly slow. First, he had to decide which colors to place next to each other, and then he had to determine the correct proportion of each color. Dots of color, pointillism. Georges Seurat learned that if he placed tiny dots of pure color next to each other on the canvas, the eye would mix the colors together when the painting was viewed from the distance. The technique became known as pointillism. Look closely at the artwork by Seurat, and you can see individual dots of paint. When you move back from the painting, your eyes mix the dots together. You see a new color, and you see the illusion of solid objects. Rather than blend colors on a palette, Seurat placed dots of pure color next to each other on the canvas. Composition, light, and color. In a clear departure from the carefree work of the Impressionists, Seurat meticulously arranged this composition. He reduced many figures and objects to simple geometric shapes that fit together almost like puzzle pieces. He created volume and the illusion of space by placing dabs of pure color in just the right proportions to create dark and light values. The deep greens and shadowy figures in the foreground lead the eye to the brilliantly lit expanse of park that appears to recede in the distance. While the brush strokes and composition move away from Impressionism, the painting does have elements of Impressionism. What are some of them? Repetition, proportion. As objects move into the distance, they become smaller. Seurat uses an Impressionist theme, leisure activities. He also uses the Impressionist palette of bright colors and captures the effect of light on objects. Artistic inspiration. A Sunday afternoon on the island of Le Grand Jatte is a widely recognized image that has inspired many contemporary artists. The more famous popular culture references include serving as the inspiration for the 1984 Stephen Sondheim musical Sunday in the Park with George, appearing in a scene in the 1986 film Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and turning up on television in episodes of The Simpsons. Le Grand Jatte. Seurat was 26 when he exhibited the monumental A Sunday Afternoon on the island of Le Grand Jatte at the Impressionist show of 1886. More than 10 feet wide and 6 feet tall, the painting presents a melange of people and animals enjoying a leisurely afternoon at the park on Le Grand Jatte, an island retreat in the Seine River. To see an audiovisual presentation of this painting, explore this art lecture. Park scene or political statement. How would you interpret this painting? Some art historians believe it simply depicts the leisure activities of a growing middle class. Others think it represents the tension between different social classes who gather in one location but do not interact. Yet another interpretation is that it is making a political statement by depicting a typically chaotic park as a tranquil resting place. Seurat himself said, "They see poetry in what I have done. No, I apply my method, and that is all there is to it." Representing social classes, with the exception of the sleeveless working class man in the foreground, Seurat clothes most of the figures in formal Sunday attire, so it is difficult for the viewer to make class distinctions. Le Moulin de la Galette by Pierre-Auguste Renoir, and A Sunday Afternoon on the island of Le Grand Jatte. Details, details. Look closely at Seurat's carefully planned composition. It includes 48 figures, 8 boats, and 3 dogs. Sorry, there was more to this comparison here of these two paintings. Form and mood. In a dramatic contrast to the relaxed and happy figures in Renoir's Le Moulin de la Galette, Seurat's figures have a stiff, frozen quality. Seurat's figures also have more of a sense of solid form than Renoir's figures. Paul Cezanne. Paul Cezanne was born in 1839 into a well-to-do family in southern France. He began his artistic studies in his hometown of Aix-en-Provence, and then moved to Paris at the age of 22, where he emulated the style of Romantic painters, including Eugène Delacroix. By the 1870s, Cezanne adopted the Impressionist color palette and subject matter. Yet, consistent with his desire to create paintings with structure and solidity, Cezanne also moved away from Impressionist conventions. French painter Cezanne emulated Romantic and Impressionist artists before developing his own unique style. Shortly before being replaced by the euro in 2002, French currency included a 100-franc banknote featuring Cezanne's portrait. Mont Sainte-Victoire. Cezanne's home in France was located near one of his favorite subjects, the Sainte-Victoire mountain. He made dozens of oil paintings of the mountain, presenting it from different views and during different seasons. Cezanne was not interested in capturing a fleeting impression of a scene, nor was he concerned with painting nature and humans exactly as he saw them. Instead, he arranged paintings in the best way he saw fit, to provide structure to the natural world and create a harmonious composition. Cezanne worked on going beyond physical appearance to capture an underlying structure of nature, based on geometric forms such as the cylinder, sphere, and cone. Explore Mont Sainte-Victoire activity on the next screen to compare Cezanne's painting with a photograph of the mountain. Cezanne painted the Sainte-Victoire mountain from a personal, emotional perspective. Compare the painting with the photograph of the mountain. What if Cezanne had chosen to paint a highly realistic image of the mountain? How might a realistic painting affect you differently from Cezanne's painting? Bold color and complex brushwork. Cezanne used vibrant color combinations and a marvelous repertoire of brushstrokes to create a painting that sings with energy and movement. He paired cool blues and violets with warm ochres, placed saturated greens next to neutral browns, and brushed smooth layers of transparent color near thick patches of opaque pigment. He applied the paint with varied yet deliberate brushstroke, thick, thin, smooth, and rough. All of those elements work together to unify the painting and create a wonderful interplay of texture and color. Color and brushwork of Cezanne. In Mont Sainte-Victoire, Cezanne used vibrant color combinations and a variety of different types of brushstrokes. Together, color and brushwork combine to unify the scene and create interest. Long, sketchy lines define the contours of the mountain. Short, parallel marks indicate the various tones of the sky. Flat patches of rich greens and ochres define the landscape. A rich tonal spectrum of darks and lights creates the illusion of three-dimensional forms. Warm colors in the foreground are sprinkled with touches of cool violets and blues, creating the illusion of depth. Renaissance artists who preceded Cezanne created the illusion of depth in paintings by using one-point perspective. One-point perspective is a mathematical system artists use to show depth in a painting involving a drawing, a horizontal line, vanishing point, and orthogonal lines, also called linear perspective and scientific perspective. They also understood that cool colors that create a cool feeling in artwork are blue, green, and violet, tend to recede on the canvas, while warm colors that create a warm feeling in an artwork, such as red, orange, and yellow, advance. Cezanne rejected one-point perspective, instead creating the illusion of depth by using pale, cool blues for the mountain and the sky. The colors gradually transition from cool to warm as they approach the foreground, which is a rich mixture of yellow, oranges, and greens, warmed by the addition of yellow. To create a sense of unity, the painting, Cezanne repeated the colors in varying degrees throughout. The cool mountain contains flecks of warm ochres, and the foreground foliage has hints of blue-violet. Cezanne did not subscribe to traditional perspective techniques. Rather, he used color to create the illusion of depth. Cool colors appear to recede or disappear in the distance. Repeating colors unify the painting. Warm ochres highlight the cool mountain. The foreground foliage has hints of blue-violet. Warm colors appear to advance or come close to the viewer. Structure and form. In Cezanne's desire to capture the underlying structure of her subject, he avoided the use of Renaissance chiaroscuro to model objects. He relied instead on strokes of color to suggest the different planes of an object's surface. Through intense observations, he discovered the underlying framework of Sainte-Victoire and used strokes of color to create the mountain's planes, simplifying it to its most basic form. For most of Cezanne's life, critics and the public ridiculed his work as that of a madman. During his final years, however, a younger generation of modern painters appreciated his talent. As with many groundbreaking artists and movements, Cezanne's genius wasn't recognized by the mainstream until after the artist's death. Cezanne used strokes of color to represent the planes of an object and create form. Quiz time! How did Seurat break from Impressionist conventions? He applied discipline in order to the Impressionists' spontaneous use of color. Which of the following best describes the technique of Pointillism? Placing tiny dots of pure color next to each other on the canvas. Which of the following best describes a characteristic of Cezanne's Mont Sainte-Victoire? Cool and warm colors create a sense of depth.